the Capital Times, Madison, Wisconsin. August 3, 1947. Their years of bondage in the South still are vivid memories for Madison's 3 oldest Negro men, this city's last surviving ex-slaves, whose combined ages total 288 years. For each of them, the harshness of plantation life as they chattels of white masters has been dimmed and softened by time, but many stories of those hardship days have been retained in their keen minds. Eldest of the 3 is Perry Vaughn, 1830, Baird Street, who can look back on 102 years of a life that included 4 years in Abe Lincoln's army, fighting for the freedom that was given to his race in the Emancipation Proclamation. Next oldest is Taswell Ebenezer Hines, 2 South Francis Street, now 96, who can recall the roaring of cannon and the crackle of rifle fire as the Union and Confederate armies fought over the fertile acres of his Virginia plantation home. Youngest of the 3 is James H. Irvin, 90, of 1854 South Park Street, who was 9 years old when the Civil War ended, and whose father became a runaway slave in 1859 to avoid being sold down the river to an unknown master in New Orleans. In accordance with the custom of that tie, Mr. Vaughn and Mr. Hines both bear the names of their slave day masters. Mr. Vaughn was born on the Arkansas plantation of Daniel Vaughn, and Mr. Hines was born into slavery on the 600 acres plantation of a Dr. Hines near Suffolk, Virginia. Mr. Irvin was born of parents who asserted their individuality, despite their slave heritage, taking a name different from those of either of their masters. At the age of 102, Mr. Vaughn has a stepdaughter, Mrs. Mary Johnson, who is 72, with whom he lives. She also has vivid recollections of the post-war days and the Reconstruction period following the Civil War. 16 years old when he joined up with Abe Lincoln's forces, Mr. Vaughn fought throughout the war as the enemy of his brother, who cast his lot with the army of Jefferson Davis. His brother's name, also taken from his master, was Elijah Beach.
I was born in Arkansas, on the Red River, on the plantation of Daniel Vaughn, where I was a slave, as were my parents, of course. I fought in Abe Lincoln's army and played the bass horn in the army band. I can still remember, like it was yesterday, playing "We'll Hang Jeff Davis on a Sour Apple Tree."
After the war, Mr. Vaughn went to Fayetteville, Arkansas, where he worked on various farms, earning cash wages for the first time in his life.
I came to Madison in 1921, the first time I ever was in the North. I came here because I had relatives in Madison.
Among his early-day Arkansas memories, Mr. Vaughn recalls meeting the notorious Frank and Jesse James, the bandit pair who terrorized man states throughout the Middle West with their daring holdups.
I met Jesse at his home and Frank too. Jesse was all right, really nice fellow personally.
In Madison, Mr. Vaughn worked on many construction jobs until his retirement several years ago. Even at the age of 102, he still keeps active, taking care of his 1-acre garden plot. Perry Vaughn passed away on September 17, 1949, just 2 years after this interview. He was laid to rest at Madison's Forest Hill Cemetery, where there is no marker to honor his life as an enslaved person or his military contributions. Mr. Hines observed his 96th birthday anniversary at a quiet family gathering in his home last Monday.
I was born on July 28, 1851, on the plantation of Dr. Hines near Suffolk, Virginia. My father was a manager there. My master had about 20 slaves. It wasn't a cotton plantation, just garden and field crops. I well remember the days of the Civil War. We could hear the guns roaring from where we were. My mother and father both died the same year, in 1863. and I and my two sisters were all put into orphan asylums. The war orphans from around there were sent partly to Philadelphia, partly to Boston, and some to New York. I was among those that were sent to New York, where I was given a home with a white family and worked for them. Later, I went to Hampton School in Virginia.
Mr. Hines came in 1905 to Madison, where he has done janitor work for many local families. His first wife died here in 1921. He married his present wife in 1927.
I'm 96 now, and I've had a full life. All that I ask from life now is that I live 4 more years so that I can celebrate my 100th birthday.
Mr. Hines passed away just 5 months later on January 7, 1948. Although he thought he was 96, his records indicated he was actually 93, which is quite remarkable. 13 years before his passing, Mr. Hines wrote his own obituary and kept it until it was needed. Similar to Mr. Vaughn, he is laid to rest at Forest Hill Cemetery in Madison, Wisconsin. Mr. Irvin was born on November 15, 1856, on a slave plantation near Hannibal, Missouri, which was Mark Twain's boyhood town.
I was born a slave, and both of my parents were slaves, for 2 different masters, but they were on plantations in the same part of Missouri. In 1859, my father's master, Mr. William Stevens, wanted to send my father down the river to sell him. My father didn't want to be sold. My mother's master was Tom William Priest, and he was a good enough man as far as I know. During the Civil War, the Union troops came to where we were and took me and my family and snuck us north. We ended up in Quincy, Illinois. We were in a free state for the first time in our lives. That was in 1862, I believe.
Mr. Hines and his family's plight will be in a future video. After the war, Mr. Irvin and his mother went further north, and he worked for many years around Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. He came to Madison in 1921, working first at the old sugar beet factory. Later, Mr. Irvin did janitor work and odd jobs for several Madison families. In 1923, he bought a 1-acre truck farm and a home in Fitchburg Township, where he lived until his wife died in 1943.
I am looking forward to living to be 100, and I think I may make it. We all live by the grace of God anyway.
Mr. Irvin rents a room at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Leroy Rogers at 1853 South Park Street. Mr. Irvin, who passed away on May 20, 1951, was reportedly born in 1856 according to the article. However, official birth and death records indicate he was born in 1852, making him 99 years old at the time of his passing. Similar to the 2 other former slaves from Madison, he was laid to rest at Forest Hill Cemetery without a grave marker.